Movie lovers, welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List Unplugged. This is my first bonus episode that I've ever done in honor of Gialli, which was Giallo July, which is hard to say 10 times fast. And I wanted to do sort of a recap analysis of how the month went. And there's no one better to do this with than Gentry and Mosquito Dragon Rob. Gentry is an expert in this area, as is Rob, actually. I'll give you some credit too, Rob. And then Rob ended up watching most of them with me. So, hi, guys. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
I am in the attire I am as a joke because Gentry's Italians do it better list literally says that Suspiria is not a giallo. So of course I had to do that. And then Rob's wearing yellow in solidarity with me.
Yeah. But Suspiria is, I mean, is it the wrong thing to say that Suspiria is the greatest giallo film of all time, Gentry?
Gentry, would that just like set you off?
Italian horror film of all time.
I don't know much about giallo, but I know that. I know Suspiria is the best one.
There are people
all right,
who
hit
actually...
the end button, we're quitting.
Okay, Gentry, to be fair, are there people that actually believe this? Like, are there people that hold this opinion? Why is it contentious?
I think just because there's that rift between those that don't make a break between Argento's like supernatural films and his giallo, which are, in my opinion, very different. And in, I think, most scholars' opinion, they're very different.
You have the intelligent people on your side.
Yeah. But it's not that big of a deal. It's just fun. It's a fun.
It's kind of a nexus point, isn't it? Because it's like there's a whole world of Italian horror, and a lot of people come into giallo from horror, and I think
exactly.
I was the same. I thought giallo meant Italian horror for a while, and then at one point I was like, oh no, it's a specific subgenre. So
I think Suspiria was probably the first film I ever saw from maybe even anything from Italy in the 70s, 80s. I think Suspiria was probably the first, because it was always on these lists of like the scariest films ever made or like the craziest films you have to see, you know. So I'm like an 18-year-old whatever kid, and I see these lists online. So I'm like, all right, I don't even know who this guy is, so I'll check this out.
And lo and behold.
And then you just like get deeper and deeper into it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tenebrae was my actual first giallo that I ever saw, and I absolutely hated it. But at least it was Argento. So I feel like I started like on a very high note.
Yeah, that's an interesting first film to watch for sure.
Yeah. Rob,
I don't know how I would have taken that, yeah.
Yeah, no. Do you remember what your first one was, Rob?
The first giallo would have been...
Yeah.
Might have been Torture a Duckling, actually. Or... it would have been Deep Red. That would have been the first one I saw.
Oh my gosh!
Ago, and
I saw that one pretty early film too. Yeah.
Okay, so it's all Argento up in here.
Yeah, that's how most people get into it.
To the United States. Yeah, his stuff was like really easy to find in the States. You know, it was on your video shelf, and you know, unlike a lot of the stuff, even today, like obviously Arrow Video's putting out a lot of stuff, but back then, I mean, Argento was the easiest to find.
Yeah, I thought Deep Red was like a killer puppet movie because in all the marketing, it had that one scene of that clockwork thing that comes out.
Yeah.
So it was not at all what I expected when I saw it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to ask you guys to define, Gentry, you can start, is what is Giallo? Because I wasn't familiar with it for the longest time, and I want to know both like if you can give us like context of what it came out of, but then also like what is it? Like the tropes, the motifs, the things that are the defining characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who I always go to when this question comes up is Troy Howarth. and he's done, a lot of research on what a giallo is, and he comes to the conclusion that it's, well, let me just read the Ernesto Gastaldi quote. If you don't know Ernesto Gastaldi, he's a screenwriter. He's done a little directing, but he's mainly known for his writing of giallo scripts. He did a lot of spaghetti westerns as well. But so he wrote in kind of the foreword to Troy Howard's book, which goes through, categorization of all the giallo. He writes, it's a detective story, not a thriller, not a suspense movie, not a horror film, but it can be any one of these things. And also it can be all these things rolled into one. And he says, what sets a giallo apart?
It's pretty clear.
So what? Yeah. So what sets a giallo apart from another story? He says two things: a difficult to explain event and its rigorously logical explanation based on the evidence and details provided in the story. The event is almost always a murder. I think that's perfect description of what a giallo can be and what it is.
Massively for me.
Really, I am very. It's really. That was a great definition that makes no sense, and quite like a giallo. Actually,
Right.
It's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. It just fits the theme beautifully.
But he doesn't mention. I think like one thing that you can mention is if there's supernatural elements. Usually, that's kind of the cutoff for a lot of people. Like Troy Howard, Ernesto Gastaldi as well. He's like, if there's supernatural elements in the story, if it can't be explained logically at the end, I mean, I'm using logically like very broadly. Like, I mean, you've watched enough of these that sometimes the ending it's explained with quote unquote logic, but it's still sometimes a little bonkers. But it still can be explained in very down to earth terms. There's no like witches or spells
like in Suspiria.
And stuff like that. Like in Suspiria. And I'll throw in one more. So Luigi Cozzi, he's another director. He says, this is a shorter one. He says, a giallo is an official synonym to indicate any work either in cinema or in literature in which someone investigates in order to unmask a murderer. So that's a broader, kind of very basic explanation, which kind of calls back to the giallo's like roots in those, the yellow paperback novels.
Okay, so then, Rob, I want you to tell me, like, since Gentry's giving the historical context, which is helpful, tell me what actually makes it, like the look of it or like the feel of it, like, because these are very distinctly a certain way that are a little bit silly, and you have to sort of get into the vibe. And I think you can speak to that.
As I watch these over the month, I don't think I've ever watched so many of these in close succession before. I've seen lots of them, but I've always kind of dotted them throughout the year kind of thing. And I was actually surprised at how hard it is to tie down a specific formula to what they are, because I think we were talking about it before we started July, and I was like, it's always a murder mystery. There's often a kill, and then it's a list of things that might be in it. So it generally looks pretty stylish. There's generally a lot of sleaze involved. There's loads of really hot women and hot men. You get a killer POV quite often, but not always. You get a black-gloved killer, not always, but often. Shiny blades. There's all these things that can go into it.
And the music.
But it was interesting. And the music, yeah. And,
one of the most
the titles.
Pieces, yeah.
Yeah.
And the titles with a really sort of long and unwieldy, but really cool, and are often like kind of dropped into the dialogue at some point in a really clunky way too, which I love. J&B bottles. There's so many things you can mention that show up. But it was interesting because you picked a lot of early ones too, and we did them in chronological order. It took ages to get anywhere near that formula. Most of the first few were totally different to that. And it's kind of, it left me, and it was kind of like, well, they're gialli, but I don't know if I could quite explain why. There's just something about them. So like Hatchet for the Honeymoon, for instance, the Mario Bava film, doesn't really follow the formula for a giallo.
Or libido, or like, there's ones that are like, it's just a male walking around sulking. The Possessed is another one.
Sulky guys, Amy's favorite.
Sad boys.
like before Argento's Bird, with the crystal plumage.
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 You know, the formula that we know as what we call Giallo now wasn't really cemented yet. You know, his film just like upped the ante with the violence and, you know, the sexualized murders and stuff like that. So yeah, the ones that, you know, you're talking about, Rob, those first, you know, even The Girl Who Knew Too Much by Bava, that, you know, which many, I mean, consider the very first official Giallo, is, you know, I think it's largely bloodless. There's not much sleaze, you know, that people think of when they think of a Giallo, but it's very much, the template's still there with the detective and the basically the out of towner who's coming into some exotic location. In this case,
but it feels so much more Hitchcockian. It's like, it's sort of half Hitchcock, you know, like it was an overt homage to Hitchcock. That's why he called it The Girl Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah,
so
I mean, look at the title. Yeah.
A reference to The Man Who Knew Too Much. But so it's interesting. A lot of it does come out of, they become kind of like a bit like audio-visual puzzles a little bit, and they're very playful in the same way that Hitchcock was, but they became this completely different thing. In the same way that the Giallo paperbacks that they took their name from, they were like Agatha Christie and Edgar Wallace and that kind of thing. And the mysteries you get in Giallo films are not really like that. They're not that tight. You know, they are a murder mystery. They'll involve sleuthing quite a lot, often from amateur sleuths. But other than that, stylistically, they're completely different.
Yeah, with cinema, it's like you can play with perception so much more than you can in those novels, which Argento's like the master of. You know, he loves putting those, you know, what did this guy see? Did he see? He thinks he saw this, but he actually saw this. And, you know, that revelation at the end it's like a key part of Argento's Giallo that eventually a lot of other people try to copycat.
Yeah.
What do you guys like about it so much? Like, what do you think it appeals to in people? Like, if somebody was like, you know, do you think I'd like this or not? How would you sell it? Like an elevator pitch?
I think it's really interesting how it examines it's very fixated on these thematics, and it doesn't really care about logic. Story is there, but it's not about the story. I think it's doing something really interesting and maybe sophisticated. Sometimes these films look like they're not sophisticated and they're bad storytelling, but I think it might be the opposite. But maybe that's just me.
On that, I always think about, you know, I think about the people that were going to see these movies during that time period, say in Italy or Spain. You know, I think we have to remember, like, these movies were made to entertain. They were like populist cinema. This isn't like, I mean, there are a few that you can definitely dig into, and there are messages within some of these films, but mostly they are, meant to like thrill and titillate audiences. And that's why that's like you were saying, Rob, that's why it's beautiful women getting murdered, and it's like the coolest music you've ever heard, and exotic locations. It's like, it's the 70s. It's like people are flying all over some people were flying if you had the money, but you know, the airline, every movie like starts and ends with like an airplane flying in or out of an airport. It's like, these are like movies that people went to because they were, you know, a lot of them are bright and they're colorful. They're not always in the dark. It's like, they were fun movies. It's interesting that, you know, some of them are darker, but mostly like people went to these movies to be entertained and have a good time.
Yeah, I was thinking that when there was like a series of movies in the marathon, and it just so happened that even though they were ordered chronologically, a lot of them were in Venice in a row. Mm-hmm. Like I watched like 4 in a row where they were all in Venice, and they're always sunny. So it's very different than like noir in that regard, where it is like people are getting killed in the woods a lot of times, and it's not necessarily at night, you know, or going swimming in the daytime. There's just a lot of day happening. So it does have a different feel to it. Although I think Argentos are a little bit different, and Fulci is a little bit different in that respect, but generally speaking.
And I think you made a good point too, Rob, about like women like gaining more independence during the 70s. I mean, that's definitely a big part of the Giallo. Like a lot of the you know, main characters are women. They have jobs. They're working on their own. They're living on their own. And so that's definitely ties into the what people went to the movies to see at this period was like, this is the zeitgeist of Italy or Spain and Europe in general, cosmopolitan Europe in general.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you guys recommend that if somebody wants to get into this? Because my buddy Michael, who's off on Letterboxd, OFF, he was like, what should I, if I want to do this, what should I start with? Give me 3 movies each of like gateway.
I mean, Argento comes to mind. Like that's the way that everyone gets into it. But I think if you get into it with Argento, I think you got to come back to Argento again and watch it again, probably, because you're not going to realize how good it is.
Okay.
Amy.
I'm taking that, Rob. I'm living proof of that. Yes, I don't think that anybody should start with Argento. Actually, as the first. I would recommend not.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah.
Why are you with the Bird? You want the Bird movie, Gentry?
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm like very chronological in my like watching habits or my viewing habits, but I always think it's like good to start to see where things started. And I think
but that would be the girl who knew too much.
Well,
right?
that or Bird. I think you can kind of swap those two.
Or Blood and Black Lace.
Or Blood and Black Lace.
I think I don't know if this is true, actually. Maybe this is just an assumption on my part because this is what I did. But I think horror fans get into Giallo as like a subgenre of horror, is how they think of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're coming from that direction and you like horror, then something like Blood and Black Lace or Deep Red.
Bay of Blood.
Bay of
Blood.
Blood.
The good one, yeah.
Yeah, but that was going to give you a slasher feeling, though.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gentry.
But that's what horror fans, that's horror, right? That's what most, horror fans think of slashers. They think of, like, creative kills and young people. And Bay of Blood has a good chunk of that, but it's also, like, a pretty strange movie on the bookends. It's like, it's very Giallo, like, at the beginning and the end. But then the middle is, like, the slasher section. So to answer your question, it's like I would kind of want to know who this, whoever I'm recommending this to. I would kind of tailor my answer to what I think the person they like. For slasher or a straight up horror fan, I would say like Bay of Blood or maybe Torso. But for someone who's maybe into more like maybe they like gothic movies or darker movies, maybe say like Libido. I think Libido is a good one. It's like a very Italian gothic giallo.
What's the one where they're in the basement? I'm like blinking out right now. Or this like very gothic and dreamlike. Was it Amok or not Amok?
Basement.
Where it's kind of like a Oh my gosh! I'm like.
Where they're in the basement.
Where they're like, yeah, there's like a ghost or like they're trying to find, and they're all like in a group. It's like a dinner party.
Is that A White Dress for Marielette?
Yeah, The White Dress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that one. That is kind of horror. That's kind of got a bit of a slasher feel to it as well.
Yeah, and it has gothic
and that feels
elements
gothic.
for sure too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of a deep cut. I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, it is. That was like one of those forgotten gialli that came out in that set. So it's like no one's even seen that up until a couple of years ago.
But if your friend, if you're recommending to someone who likes real, they like sleazy slasher. I mean, Strip Nude for Your Killer is fun.
Has to be mentioned.
Edwidge. Just watch something with Edwidge.
It's like Edwidge Fennec, right? Is that how it's pronounced? How you guys would pronounce it?
I always say Fennec, but that's because there was like a really famous Australian boxer called Fennec. Maybe it's not pronounced that way. I don't know.
We'll just call her Edge Finn.
Edge Finn, yeah.
Yeah, it's for short. This is probably my greatest contribution to Letterboxd is making people watch movies with Edwidge. I had never seen her in my life before this, and then we were all collectively thirsty together in solidarity.
That'll happen.
Yeah, and I really like that she is like objectively hot, and it's not a matter of opinion to me.
There's a Twitter account that every Friday they do like Fennec Friday, and they just post a bunch of hot pictures of Edwidge Fennec.
Right.
And they get
we're all gonna follow that right now.
Yeah, go find it. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about how it changed over time. Gentry, I'm going to ask you this first. When you first watched them in succession, how do you start to think about it, and then how do you end up thinking about it? And then Rob, I want you to answer the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, I always think about there's this she's an Australian. I think she's written some books, and she also does a lot of commentaries on Giallo. Alexandra Heller Nicholas, you'll see her name pop up pretty often. She was talking, I remember, on a commentary with someone else, and she talked about how when she was kind of marathoning these films or watching them, back in the day when she probably really got into them in the 90s, they kind of like rewired. I think her quote was like, "It rewired my brain." And I was like, yeah, I can kind of understand that, because it's like they sort of open up like possibilities that you might not have thought of with regard to like what cinema can be. They're, movies at their core are just like, they're moving pictures that are like edited, and then you set music and sounds to them. But Giallo and Euro cult cinema in the 70s and 80s a bit, it's very like the way that they shoot and they edit films is very different than if you're coming to it from like a classical film perspective. For one, the synced sound can kind of throw people off, but I think it opens up like so many possibilities to just have fun with editing and movies and sound and, Foley effects and ADR. Like, you can do a lot when you're not recording directly to sound. So that's kind of how I view them, where, when I first saw them, the dubbing, if you can get past the dubbing, it opens up a pretty wide swath of inspiration, and just like it opens up your mind to what movies can look like and sound like. Does that make sense?
I reckon the dubbing is such a big deal for people. I reckon it's so hard for people to get past that, because it's just not done anymore. It's just not in modern.
It's
like,
so
even
foreign.
But like even in the late 80s and early 90s, like British films, like genre films, they're all dubbed. If you go back and watch, like Hellraiser is a classic example, but there's so many that it was quite common. So it wasn't that long ago. Well, I suppose that is long ago.
But with Giallo, though, or European films, like when they're speaking another language, they're all speaking different languages on set, so the lips don't match. With Hellraiser, at least the lips match, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all speaking English.
Yeah.
Some of these Italian films are spaghetti westerns are the same. They're just so like way off.
They're not even trying.
So when they did the ADR, they're like kind of close enough, whatever. Just like say roughly the same sort of timings.
That's the other thing too. Like, to answer your question, when I've watched so many that I don't even notice really the dubbing as much.
I was going to say that. Yes, I don't either.
But then sometimes if I'm watching it with someone else who's not used to it, then I kind of notice it. I'm like, you know what? This is actually really, really weird. Like how this is made. They're just like, they can do whatever they want in the editing studio. Like, they could create whole different conversations that weren't in the script. And sometimes they did.
Yeah. So, Rob, when you were saying, I know you said this about Deep Red in particular, where it really changed for you because you had watched so many in succession, but in the evolution of the films, was there anything else that stands out to you in your memory of, like, this definitely, I didn't think this 20 days ago, or I didn't think this 2 weeks ago, and now I'm like very in tune and like conscious of it, of a change?
No, it's more that I think because I rewatched a lot of films as part of that project, because a lot of it was the second time I'd seen them, and they almost always are better than I remembered. And I don't know if it's because some of them I saw earlier on, and I think there is a sort of hump of, there's a barrier to get over to get into the vibe of these films. And once you get in, I've had this feeling before where I've watched one Giallo and sort of thought, maybe I should just do it for a month, because they're a little bit moreish. You kind of want it again. And you sort of you develop, it's the ultimate acquired taste in a way, in terms of movies. It's like, once you get it, you want more and more and more, and it becomes quite addictive.
Get addicted to it.
And then there's always other people, and we've had it on Letterboxd, a lot of friends of ours on Letterboxd who are kind of like, yeah, I'm trying, but I can't quite get the appeal of these movies, and people are really trying hard, and you're sort of like, yeah, I get it. It's like, it's not, you kind of got to just accept it for what it is, and it's not going to do what other films do.
You have to look at it in the context of when they were made. You can't really put a modern lens on it, or else it's going to be extremely problematic.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's kind of like good scotch, where it doesn't taste great when you first have it, but then like the more that you do, that you get like the nuance of the flavor. Because that's, I think, what happened to me was all of a sudden I started noticing things that I never have, but then I actually marathoning Gialli would change how I watched normal movies. Like I was suddenly seeing movies that weren't in that category differently, or I was looking for different things, or I was noticing different things, especially colors. Nobody is nearly as hot. Nobody is nearly as like casually sort of like, I don't know. There's like an ease that's there that might kind of be the 70s. Because Rob and I have talked about this. It's not just that they're attractive people. There's like some sense of freedom that's there, I feel like. And it's really relaxing. It almost puts you into a sort of different mental state.
Yeah.
That's soothing.
Yeah, it is. That's weird when people say that, but they are like comfort movies.
In a way.
Like the summer, a lot of them, cool cars and like the sun and the beach and exotic locations. Yeah, it's
and
really
murder.
Their dreams, they kind of dream like.
And then sometimes, someone gets stabbed in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob. It's like a dream. Like it's like mesmerizing.
Yeah, they've got. I was just say they've got. Yeah, and that becomes kind of nightmare logic at certain times as well when they get more horrific, and nothing necessarily follows real world logic. It's the kind of logic your mind would accept if you're asleep, if you're in that weird theta state where your logical faculties aren't really working, and it's just what you fear happens or what you desire happens. And I think on the sex side of things in these films, I think it's really interesting too, because like you were saying, Gentry, like there's so many elements that would be problematic, but also it's kind of interesting to me to compare them to films today from the Western world, like any of the English-speaking world, and they're pretty sexless these days. Do you know what I mean? Like sex is right out. There are no sex scenes in films anymore, hardly, unless that's specifically what the film's about. Have people lost interest in sex, or is it just because, I don't know, everyone's watching porn on the internet instead, so we don't need these like softcore scenes in movies anymore? I don't know.
You can just blame the MCU,
that's part of
Rob.
It, for sure. Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, there wasn't access to that kind of stuff back then. If you wanted to see like sexy people, you went to the movies. You didn't go on the internet.
But I think there's even a difference between the kind of sex and sexuality as presented in these Italian films from the 70s. And even if you compare them to like 80s slashers, right? So there's a lot of nudity in 80s slashers, but it feels completely different. It's kind of just like show tits, show butts. This is what the teenagers want to see. There's no sensuality to it. It's not particularly sexy.
Eroticism.
There's no eroticism. Whereas these films are much more. You get a lot of nudity, obviously, but it's in a completely different way to what you would see in these other films.
Yeah, I never really thought that like the Giallo nudity, it doesn't, and like the sexuality, it never really feels that mean spirited. I think some of Argento's later films do start to get a little mean with it, but mostly I don't get that feeling of like feeling gross or icky about.
That's such a
no. I think it's the opposite. It's the opposite vibe. Like Forbidden Photos and Laughing Woman and Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. All the ones that I loved the most. There is this sort of even the Perfume one, Perfume the Lady in Black that Gentry loves so much.
As do I.
Mimsy is Mimsy Farmer is not necessarily like explicitly sexy, but there is a confidence there that all these women have that carries the films a lot of times. And so that's why I like Torso so much, honestly, because the female is so formidable and she's these people have a sense of like personal agency even as they're being killed off. There's something about that is very refreshing.
You were asking a question about what I realized. That you mentioned Argento, Gentry. He treats sexuality very differently to all the other Giallo filmmakers do. He doesn't. His films are not particularly erotic or sensual. They're
right.
There's sexuality in them, but it's a little bit more like what you would find in a horror film, which is it's a source of dread somehow. It's he's just putting it near death.
Yeah, or trauma.
Yeah. So it's not really. It's like I get the sense he's not really interested in sex in the same way that someone like Sergio Martino was, or Ercole. These guys are sort of way into. Part of the reason they're making this film is to show a lot of eroticism. That had never struck me before how different Argento's view on that was.
Yeah, he uses a lot of comedy in his early films too, with like some of the like a lot of sex jokes and funny characters and flamboyant characters. But then like his later stuff gets once his daughter starts. He starts casting his daughter in movies. It gets a little
It gets a little
weird.
It gets a bit weird.
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, I don't know what he was dealing with.
The Stendhal syndrome is very weird in that way, man.
It's so. But that movie is so dark. Like Stendhal syndrome is. It's rough. I don't know. I think that's like one of his roughest films for me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Don't you have that in your bio, Gentry? That you're an apologist for. Is it that's his daughter, right?
Yeah, Asia Argento. Asia, yeah.
I know. So what does that mean that you what?
That's a whole other messy thing with Asia Argento.
Yeah.
I just feel it comes down to I don't know. I feel like a certain sympathy towards what she's gone through in life.
I do too. Yes.
Okay.
Justice for Asia.
She's not perfect. She's made a lot of bad decisions, but she had a very strange life.
Yeah, can you imagine? I saw an interview with her. I think they were talking about this. I think it was like a bonus feature on the Stendhal syndrome or something, where they were just interviewing her and they were like, "How do you feel about like your father casting you in this role as like someone who gets raped and stuff like that?" And she's like, "He's a fucking psycho. Who would do that with their daughter?" Like she just comes out and says it. It's like he's a weirdo. Why would you cast your daughter in a role like that? It's like.
Well, why would you accept the role?
Well, it's hard as an actor. You need to take the work you're given, don't you?
She wasn't. Yeah.
It's kind of like John Huston. I saw an interview where he was talking about Angelica and just always having her. She's in a bunch of his movies, and she was like, "It was the times, man. I mean, like they were just not like people were getting high all the time and on cocaine, and like there's just a lot. It's just a totally different." Atmosphere and a lot of the things that happened then. Like I know we were just talking, this is unrelated, but it just came to my mind. We were talking about Friedkin and To Live or Die in LA and how like those car scenes would have never ever been filmed today because people are just like way too scared and there's too many rules. So there's also this.
Well, that can be said about the sex scenes too in Giallo.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. We're in like a very puritanical by the book time. Despite the fact that the culture itself is so obsessed with looks and sex. And yet a lot of the things we see are very clean.
I think that's why Giallo it's having a moment. It had a moment, like a few years ago, it was on everybody's lips. All the filmmakers were like name dropping Giallo because of that reason. Like you said, Amy, it's like filmmaking felt looser back then. It was looser. Like you could run and gun, you could shoot on the street, you could do a lot of things that are hard to do today with a big budget, even like a medium budget film. I think you still could do something like a Giallo today, but it would have to be very small scale. And you'd have to have a team that's willing to do things probably that they're not used to, like, a style of shooting and acting, I should say.
Right. Yeah, and there's no like what would you guys call like a modern Giallo besides like the weird one I just saw with Frank?
I think well, you've got
color of your body's tears.
Are they Swiss or Belgian that married couple? Are they married? They're a couple that make films. Hélène Catet and Bruno Forzani.
That's the one that
Strange Color of Your Body Tears.
That's the Let the Corpses Tan
and all that. So
right.
They're definitely they're almost I guess they're homage, really, aren't they?
That's what I was going to say. It doesn't feel like has anybody made? I know De Palma
other than
like
Argento,
loved it, and like Tarantino loves it, but they don't actually make films.
I know you didn't watch this one, Amy, but Knife Plus Heart is definitely intended to be a giallo.
And you think Dressed to Kill
is totally a giallo. I mean, apart from the fact it's not Italian, it ticks almost every other box.
Which Gentry might have a problem with.
Yeah, it's giallo adjacent for sure. Yeah.
I mean, if giallo has to be Italian, it's not a giallo. But it's basically made exactly like a giallo. It even down to the black gloved killer, the sort of fetishizing of the blade, the sexuality, the amateur sleuths who have a sort of romance going on, the weird fucked up view of kind of non-binary sexuality. Even like it's all there, you know.
The ambiguity around like sexuality and the killer in general. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned De Palma because it's like, so what was that? I don't know what year Dressed to Kill was, like 80.
I can't remember. Yeah, early 80s.
80. It was 80,
right.
1980. Okay, so yeah.
Okay.
Like Dressed to Kill also, it's funny, when that came out, that also inspired kind of like a little mini
resurgence.
Resurgence of Giallo again. So I'm thinking specifically of there's one called Nothing Underneath that came out in 85, which it's a Giallo. It's an Italian production by a guy named.
Yeah, but you don't include Night School in this, do you, Gentry?
No,
even though I had
American.
it in my.
Yeah, it's a majority like American production. I mean, it has like a few people in it that have been in Giallos before, but so like De Palma, like when his movies came out, then some of those Italians were like, "Oh wait, we're gonna rip off De Palma while also sort of homaging Giallo." So it's like a weird mashup.
But I mean, I think the reason,
even though De Palma,
I think Giallo is not being made Italian Giallo is not being made anymore. It's like an Italian film industry thing in general. I don't quite know the history of it. It's quite sad because like they were making so many films all through the 50s, 60s, 70s in their real heyday, and the genre films in the 70s was probably the golden age for Italy. And then in the 80s, they became a kind of rip-off factory. So they were making a lot of films that I love, but they are rip-off. That's what they were doing. So even the same guys like Sergio Martino, like the first time I saw 2019 After the Fall of New York, which is a post-apocalyptic film, and saw it was directed by him, I was like, no, that must be a mistake. That can't have been Sergio Martino because that's...
It's a different Sergio.
They were like the Mad Max films, the sharksploitation films, But then TV came, and just like
the Italian industry just died. So they're not. I mean, there's Italian films, but I don't know what's happened to I think the industry is just completely different. They're not churning them out in any way like they used to. It's become
it's
small
TV.
scale.
It's still TV.
So it's just the golden era. It's like a time capsule at this point. Like it's like you're going back to a time that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. That's why it's like when people talk about like modern Giallo, I'm like, it's like, you can call some of them are like, you can call them Giallo, but it's like you're can't capture that lightning in a bottle. I'll like 80s ones. There's a lot of 80s ones that are definitely Giallo, but it's like once you get into the 80s and out of the 70s, it's very different.
It's just not the
same.
It's not
the golden
age. It's not the
same. For sure. There is like a golden age. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Okay, so in my marathon, I had 31 films. What would you guys say that I left out? I did say that I need to watch the Footprints on the Moon movie. I need to watch the Bloody Iris movie just so I can get my Edwidge on.
Bloody Iris, I would say Bloody Iris for sure.
Okay.
It's
okay. What else?
Like it's a golden age Giallo. It like has all the elements. Other than that,
Cat of Nine Tails is an obvious one because it's the other.
Oh, Argento.
Let me look at your list again.
Well, I think there was just a few that were high ranking on yours, Gentry.
Yeah, I would do like What Have You Done to Solange?
That was there.
I did.
Oh, you did that.
What Have You Done to Your Daughters would be the other one. The other one by Dallamano.
Oh, okay, that's the one Sakana
That's awesome.
really
she loves
recommended.
That one. But that one gets a little bit more into like the crime genre.
It's a little bit of both, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like The Suspicious Death of a Minor is kind of like half Giallo, half Polizioteschi. It's a different
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of what Fifth Chord was, and that was my favorite.
Yeah, but
besides Deep Red.
But it's a bit different from that as well. You've got like the other late Argento one would be Opera, which is kind of like where he ended up in terms of Giallo before. It was probably his last really good film.
Yeah, but isn't Opera really weird?
It's
like
really weird.
Right? And Inferno?
Yeah, but Inferno is like Suspiria.
I wouldn't really consider.
Don't upset Gentry, man.
Oh, okay.
Inferno
Sorry.
Giallo.
I know. Gentry, I'm just going to piss you off.
All right, so I'm reminded here, the biggest black hole on your list is two films that feature the same actress, which is Death Walks at Midnight and Death Walks on High Heels.
Oh,
Did you end up
featuring Nieves Navarro? Yeah, those are two.
They're like a trilogy with Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion.
Yeah,
whatever it's called.
It's the same. Yeah, same directors. Forbidden Photos.
Okay.
But these two, star Nieves Navarro. Like, she was in that film as well. But these are really more her films.
You did have.
And then the Cat movie is like completing the animal
but there's no story link between them. Right? I think it's just because they were his first three.
I know. They're just random. Yeah. They're just random.
You had the Red Queen killed 7 times on your list at one point, didn't you? But that's one.
I did do that movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I just didn't watch it.
Yeah. I got that DVD from Andrew Draper. And that one was really good. It just felt kind of different to me. That really felt like
the Red Queen killed 7 times?
Yeah, because the sister was so psychotic.
Right.
I could see that.
Yeah, it could just, I don't know, that felt different.
I'm a fan of Seven Deaths in the Cat's Eye. That's a good one.
Vibe-wise.
It's a bit gothic.
Yeah, that's very gothic, very gothic.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gentry has brought with him a gift. He comes bearing gifts besides the sign behind his head. You have a literally Giallo themed game, right? This is this like flashcards?
It's like
not
flashcards.
Really like a board
it's
game.
basically flashcards.
Game. Okay. So you're gonna show us pictures, and then Rob is gonna say,
"Oh, come on! Don't act like
because you're gonna hit your buzzer. You didn't bring your buzzer.
Yeah, I've got mine.
I should have had.
Right here.
I should have done. To say it in the British way, I should have done. Okay, Gentry, go ahead. We're gonna try.
Yeah, it's very just name that Giallo based on the picture. So we will start with
drum roll.
All right,
he's so bad at this, Rob.
Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward.
It's Edwidge.
Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward.
Amy,
is it? Yeah. I'm gonna say yes.
No,
Strange Vice.
It is The Case of the Bloody Iris.
Oh,
which I haven't seen, so that's not fair.
Okay.
Rob, it could have been any Edwidge film.
All right, here is a very different one.
Okay.
Can you look closely? Can you see what that is?
Like a bridge? Oh, for those of you who aren't watching,
it's kind of like a parking garage. It's a very parallel image. Yes,
that's what I was going to say. Fifth Chord.
You got it.
Yes. High five.
Some wonderful cinematography in that film.
Oh, I love the cinematography of Fifth Chord. Oh my gosh.
Here's a fun one. All right, we got. Can you see what that is?
Gentry, describe the images as you're putting them up.
It is sort of a switchblade knife. Well, I don't want to give away too much. And it looks like there's kind of smoke around
it.
There's
like smoke?
I'll give you a hint. It's actually it's someone hitting a light bulb with a knife.
It's Argento, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not Deep Red?
No.
Is it the Grey Velvet movie?
No.
Four Flies on Grey Velvet? No.
It is Tenebrae.
I was just about to say that.
Oh, it's Tenebrae.
I believe
Come
it's
on, Rob.
one of the first kills. It's the kill with he kills the girl up with the dress. He makes the hole in the dress. It's that kill.
Yes.
In that.
Okay.
All right.
I only really recall the one with the 2 women. That one's very memorable.
All right. This one might be easy.
Okay, what are we
that
looking
is
at?
Dagmar Lysander. I'll give you that.
Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion.
Yes. Yes, that is
yes,
it.
Yeah, I can somewhat
they're a bit
see these,
pixelated,
they're
but
a
that's
little
okay.
bit blurry, so it's hard.
Yeah,
The description
they'll be a
helps.
little blurry.
Yeah, but they won't be to everyone else, but to us maybe.
Yeah. This is... There we go.
To the left. Okay, what does it describe it?
It is a very pretty girl biting her hand in suspense.
Oh, is that Torso?
Looking off screen at something. Yes, it is the end of Torso.
Susie
Kendall.
It's the end of Torso.
I love that ending. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
I love that ending as well.
Very good ending. Where she's not sure who's going to be coming, or who's going to come around the corner. Is it going to be the killer or who won the fight at the end, basically?
Yeah.
All right, we got this one. Looks good in the light.
Good job.
It's another beautiful woman who looks very wet and like she's come out of the water. She's staring in horror at something.
Bay of Blood.
I do not recognize
I don't know,
that.
actually. Yeah, Bay of Blood is my guess.
Yeah.
That is Scorpion's Tail. The Case of the Scorpion's Tail.
The Case of the Scorpion's Tail.
Is Anita
That's higher
Strindberg.
on Gentry's list, I think. Or no, it's the Bloodstained Butterfly that you really like.
I like that one, yeah. All right, this is a different one.
We're failing at this game, Rob.
Who's keeping score?
It is a black and white Giallo.
Libido.
And she says, "Does the storm frighten you?" This is what the subtitle says. It's a little difficult one. It is on your list. I will give you
Girl
that.
Who Knew Too Much.
It is one that you watched, Amy.
Or Libido.
No. Libido.
Right.
It's Libido.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dominique Bochero.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good picture. I like that. It's kind of aesthetically pleasing.
All right, here's another one. The subtitle says, "I got the blank right between the eyes," is what she's saying. I will say this is an 80s Giallo. It's a little bit. It's one you watched.
A little.
It
is one I watched?
Yeah.
Is it Stage Fright?
Yes. You got it.
Yes. That movie was bonkers. But it did have my favorite masks that I've ever seen in my entire life. I think the owl mask is like
amazing.
I'm surprised no one's made that. Like someone created like a, I don't know, just like
we do that like for Halloween. Yeah.
It's a deep cut.
That would be. It's a deep cut. I don't think anybody would recognize who it is.
You'd have to explain to everyone.
Right. This is This is another actor we saw previously in another photo. It is a woman with very wild, unkempt hair. Looks like she's probably been abused by Luigi Pistilli.
Oh, I know this.
Your voice is a locked room. Is that the one?
Yes.
Locked room, and only I have the key.
Yes.
Glad that we made a shout out to that title because that is everyone's favorite.
It's the best title.
The title or the movie?
Yeah.
The title.
Yeah.
People love that title. Yeah.
That
woman was really tortured.
Yes.
Tormented.
Yeah, she was upset.
And it's funny because I think like with that hair, see her wild hair in that photo, like I think she intentionally was like trying to make herself look quote unquote ugly, but it's like, yeah, she still looks great.
Yeah, come on. Can't do anything.
This will be an easy one, probably, because it's an actress that is very distinct. Blonde hair.
4 Flies.
Looking a little bewildered.
Yeah, it's got to be 4 Flies, right?
No.
Perfume of the Lady in Black.
No, or Perfume.
Perfume
of the Lady in Black.
She's saying, "Do not eat me."
And this is someone that you really love, Gentry, right?
Yes.
The key to your heart is Mimsy Farmer.
Yes.
Not Edwidge. Terrible.
All right, we got. I don't think you watched this one. The hint is that. Well, I will say this is Daria Nicolodi. That's a big hint.
Phenomenon.
And it's the last. No, good guess. It's the last movie by director before he died. It is Mario Bava's Shock.
Yeah. Okay. Haven't seen that. No.
Have you seen it, Rob?
Haven't got to that one yet.
Oh, okay.
All right, the last
Shock.
one, I don't think... Oh, go ahead, Amy.
No, go ahead.
Last one.
The last one is I don't think either of you have seen this. It is an oddball. It's a very strange, I shouldn't say strange, but it's a unique gialli from the 80s that plays with the tropes in a really interesting way that I think you should see. And can you see what she's saying there? She says, "Do you like gialli?"
No, read it.
She says, "Hey, you like gialli?" And he says, "Yeah." And it is from The Killer Is Still Among Us.
Oh, wow.
So
I haven't seen that one.
I just thought it was funny because they talk about gialli in the
Giallo in the right.
And the ending of the film, I'd have to double check. I think Castaldi wrote it, and he was, this is like the 80s. He's like, oh, let's just do something different. And the ending is kind of meta. That's all I'll say because you haven't seen it. So check that one out.
Right. Okay.
That was in that was in one of the Forgotten Gialli sets.
Right, yeah. I thought I saw it. I watched The Killer is One of 13, I think it was called. I watched that this month too, but it's not that
one.
Before we go, does anybody have anything to say about Amok?
It's really good.
Amok is a very fun, entertaining, sunny giallo with really
why do you hate it, Amy?
Great music.
Why do you hate it?
God, Amok! Exclamation point. It's so far from being enjoyable. It's just so slow and weird. Who's the lead guy in that movie?
Farley Granger.
Farley Granger. Hitchcock's favorite.
Yeah, from Strangers on a Train.
Oh my gosh. That one, and then what were I also couldn't stand. Well, Death Laid an Egg is a weird one.
That was my discovery of the month. But that's like a Pasolini film or something.
Oh my
that was
gosh.
not what that was just so bizarre. I loved it.
All the Colors of the Dark was okay, but kind of weird as well. I ended up not vibing at all with any of the weird ones, I think.
Interesting. Even though that has Edwidge.
Yeah.
You didn't love it.
Even though that has Edwidge, but it's
Rosemary's Baby giallo.
Yeah, exactly. And I told Rob it's like that movie, The Love Witch. Have you seen that, Gentry?
I know about
That's
it.
definitely kind of giallo-ish.
Okay. Yeah.
Sort of. It's a bit of an homage, isn't it? Yeah.
Definitely.
At least in the look.
Yeah, with the colors and the cinematography, and like, I'm not crazy about things with like cults and Satan.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that has like where the devil is in it, or there's like people doing satanic rituals of some kind, because that movie was pretty violent. There was a lot of blood.
Which one?
And like All the Colors of the Dark.
Oh, yeah. Well, in
their sort of ceremonial way. Yeah, I'm not a fan, but yeah, it is like Rosemary's Baby. I can't remember if there was something I gave half a star to. I feel like I did though, and then got attacked. But it's not coming to my mind right now. It might have been Amok though, where it was just like,
Tank. What were your least favorites? Can we?
Yeah, that's what you were. That's what you had made the list about.
So Amok was.
There was one that I gave like 1, and then Rob gave it like 4.
You didn't like Hatchet, Amok.
Hatchet for the Honeymoon. Yeah, you didn't like that one.
Oh, the Psychic. It's the Psychic because it was on Tubi. And it was dubbed, and it sounded like a soap opera. Like it literally was like Days of Our Lives level.
You can say that about
dialogue.
so many of these films, though. It's just so weird which ones you take exception to for the same reason. That is in all of them.
No, do you agree, Gentry, about the Psychic?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what version I watched last, but yeah, I think that one generally is probably better in Italian.
Yeah, it is. I'd watched it in Italian.
But again, that one also, you might not like it even when you watch it again in Italian in a better version, because it is slow. It's very procedural and moody. Yeah, it's a slow, surprisingly for Fulci. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, another slow one that I actually enjoyed quite a lot was the House of Laughing Windows.
Love that one.
I love that film.
Yeah, that one is super vibey, and it is slow. Like it unfolds, but it's kind of philosophical in a way too. And you don't really know what the heck is going on.
Oh, what an ending! Though. We can't talk about
like,
it. That
holy
ending, man,
shit!
that's an all-timer. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it just ends.
Yeah.
Like you it's like revealed, and then it's like, all right, bye. Like
you could put it in like that
sub
genre of like the rural giallo that take place in Don't Torture a Duckling is another rural giallo.
Oh yeah, good
There's
point.
a few others, but yeah, they're not in
like
major
small
cities.
Town giallo.
Yeah. And they deal with kind of the superstitions in these, these small Italian towns, which are kind of a world apart. Which is actually the northern section of Italy. So the northern section of Italy is like the more rural area. It's kind of like our American South.
Our South. Yeah. Right. And it's got that, I like the stranger comes to town stuff. Mm-hmm. Like whenever there's an outsider coming in and they're like, do you know about this legend or do you know about this curse? And they're like, no. And you're like, this person's screwed. You should have picked a different town on the map.
You should have.
He's like, I'm just here to like paint stuff.
Restore this fresco somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that film doesn't have I don't think it has like a Blu-ray American release.
No, it doesn't.
Yet,
It doesn't.
Strange.
I don't think there's a Blu-ray of it.
I think there's something there. Whenever you find those, there's always like something weird holding them up. Probably some sort of rights issue or something. Yeah. Because it's well known. Like that's another one that I saw early on. Weirdly enough, like I got it through Netflix, early Netflix. I got the disc.
When they were like mailing them to your house.
Yeah, I got the disc from them because it was on a list of like super scary movies and like or disturbing movies. That's like me and my friends like just watched every movie on these forum lists that were like the most disturbing movies you could find, and that one was on there. Just under. Is there any giallo that you guys were like, oh, it's too much? Like, did you ever see one that you just like? There was something about it that was, I don't know, like it turned you off too much, or just was uncomfortable.
Yeah, some of them are just a bit some of them are just a bit too crappy, like just not particularly well made. I never react. I don't think I've ever reacted to a giallo like you do sometimes, Amy, which is I hate that. I generally I kind of love them all. There's some that are just not that great.
There's one called
a lot of people don't. Oh, go ahead.
The
Gentry.
French Sex Murders. That's what it's called. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
I love that one.
No, I've never heard
That's
of
the
it.
one with the Humphrey Bogart impersonator.
Yes, with the Bogart guy. Lead. Yeah. Like most people
you don't like that one?
Don't like that. I don't love it. I think it's like, but even that, like I was going to say, like it's goofy enough that it's entertaining, but it's definitely not even a mid or top tier giallo.
Oh, it's not top tier. No.
Yeah, but I am more. I mean, this is kind of the complaint about me just in general. Like if I don't like something, it's pretty hardcore usually. Like, and then it goes into this descent. I think everything. I'll end with this question just because this is like a letterbox question I have. Do you guys, when you start a movie, does the movie start at 0 and go up as you go, or do you start at 5 and then it goes down as you go mentally?
Neither.
Would you say?
Neither.
Like when you go into something,
like
you like, no, but I mean, is your impression of it that you're hoping for the best and then it sort of
always.
Is like, okay, or are you sort of starting from nothing and then it's building?
Like do you start out a movie cantankerous and suspicious of it or something? Kind of like it's got to win you over. Is that
right? Or are you already like, I really want to like this?
I always want to like what I'm watching, and I usually do because I'm reasonably good at picking movies I like, except when I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once the other day.
Oh, geez. Which no one should ever subject themselves to.
But everyone loves it.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, you don't really watch a lot of modern movies.
Yeah. You're good. Don't worry about it.
I was trying to ask Gentry.
They're just too long.
When
I don't have that.
I know. It goes for like 10 hours. For fuck's sake. It was killing me.
Every movie is just too long. I'm like, well, I could watch this 3-hour movie, or I could watch like
or
two
I
and
could
a half
watch
giallo,
2 movies.
Or I could watch like 5 movies from the 1930s.
Yeah.
That is a good point that we didn't bring up, and I'm glad that you did. That the run times are a big selling point, and that is true for noir as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of times those are like 85 minutes or 80 minutes, and you're like in and out, and it feels good, and they're kind of lean and tight. They're not like there's nothing inessential about them. Right. So I feel like that's
I can't think of a Giallo that is like that really wore me
super
down.
long.
I mean, Deep Red is a couple hours, the Italian cut.
It is pretty long, yeah.
But it doesn't really. It doesn't feel. I don't think it feels long ever.
No.
No, because the Goblin soundtrack. Yeah. It's too gnarly.
Yeah.
It's too metal. Okay, well, thank you both so much for doing this with me. I think that I'm going through withdrawal right now, and we'll have to do another marathon. I think what I do, though, is this was sort of an exposure therapy in a way. But I think that like maybe at the end of the year, I could do like 15, like instead of doing the full 30, because every day is a little bit difficult logistically.
There's 15 good ones you could do that you haven't seen yet, I think.
Yeah, I've got 15 left, right?
Oh, easy.
Right,
easy. There's so many of these.
Easy.
There's a lot.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll probably do 15 at the end of the year, but I appreciate that everyone sort of caught things here and there, and then Rob was with me for the long haul.
Yeah, I hopped in and just watched the ones that I hadn't seen for a while that I really wanted to revisit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then you were there sort of saying, like, your reviews are very helpful because they do contextualize.
Good.
Like, in just the grand scheme of it, you are very good at, like, bringing in.
Yeah, I always try to look at, like, the director's work and the year it came out. I mean, those are important, I think, for any movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, context. And for these, I think there's just a rich sense of, like, a very specific time and place. Mm-hmm. And it takes you there every time.
Yeah, you could also, Amy, do, like, kind of a theme. We could put together some kind of theme. You could do, like, more of the Gothic Giallo, like 2 or 3 Gothic Giallo or something like that.
Or it could be director-centric, too, because there are a bunch. I think Sergio Martino ended up being my favorite director of all of them. I mean, I'm leaving out Argento because, yes. But I think Martino was the one that I ended up vibing with most. In terms of consistency, because I saw like 5 of his.
He's one of my favorites too, definitely.
Yeah, and I'd also say
Argento's a bit more hit and miss with you, I suppose. So,
yeah.
Well, he is hit and miss in general too. Watch those 2 Luciano Ercole, those Death Walks at Midnight, Death Walks on High Heels. Those 2.
Okay,
I like them. Yeah.
I think we've given the people enough guidance and context to go forth and giallo it up.
And they've been informed of Suspiria's status.
Suspiria. Yes. And I am here in defiance, even though I actually do agree that it's not a giallo, but it is one of my favorite movies, period. I did give it 5 stars, and it is exceptional, and everyone should see it. No matter who you are, if you like horror, if you don't. It is such an experience, I feel.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
And we'll see you at the movies.
Bye.